Welcome to another edition of Emvpanayv, Gary Fife Jaho Jifkidos. We welcome you joining us during this holiday season. I'm here today with our technical director, Jared Moore, of course, who's punching the buttons for me, and our managing editor, Braden Harper, who's come in to talk to me about the past year and what we might be seeing. Now, Braden, you've been in the office now for 2 years, is it?
I'll be about 2 years here in April.
Right. And as managing editor, I'm not sure that people really know what that role really involves. So maybe you could take a second and explain what you do.
Sure. Well, for our superhero fans out there, if you are familiar with Superman, I'm kind of like the Perry White of The Office, or Spider-Man. If you're more familiar with Spider-Man, I'm like the J. Jonah Jameson. I request for pictures of Spider-Man and copy and all that. Now I'm just playing around a little bit, but that's essentially what the role is I am the news team lead, and I'm someone that just make sure that all the news gets out on time, make sure that we're covering a diverse areas of news, not just fluffy, fun news, but also, serious news, hard news, crime, sports, local interest, and just making sure that our paper is well-rounded to serve our Mvskoke people.
Well, let's explore that for a second now. In serving our citizens here, where do you get your sources, and what kinds of things do you think are important to pop up in Mvskoke News, in Emvpanayv, and the Mvskoke Visions? What's the focus there? And I would imagine there are several foci, if that's the correct term. But what are you looking for, and where do you get it?
Well, essentially, we try to cover everything Mvskoke, Native American, and Indigenous. Essentially, in terms of if you want to tier it, our most important focus is always going to be the Mvskoke people and the Mvskoke culture. What is going on within the nation in terms of politics, what's going on culturally, what's going on within the communities, and in broadening that scope a little bit. Certainly, we also want to provide coverage for what's going on with the indigenous people of this continent, for Native Americans. What's in terms of pop culture, what's going on in terms of what are our Native American people doing to advance their cultures, and as well as what are the Mvskoke people doing to advance our culture. I know recently you just did some coverage on the Wilma Mankiller Barbie doll that recently just came out. That's a big development that just came out. And just as well, you think about bringing it back here to things that our people are doing. I always think of Sterling Harjo's reservation dogs. The barriers that he's breaking through television and telling the stories of our people, well, not just Mvskoke, but Native Americans in general, and ultimately, just advancing our culture in that regard as well. So ultimately, just anything that is relevant to the Mvskoke news consumer, it's going to appear in the paper or on Livewire or here in Emvpanayv.
Now, I think most successful news enterprises contain that variety. Everything from the hard news coming out of D.C., new law, new appropriations or controversy, down to the relaxed community kind of thing, which might mean a community football team or singers or artists or photographers, things like that. That's such a widespread world that we try to cover. So how is it that you're able to tackle what you can? I guess we're pointing at the reporting staff here, but you've got to come up with some ideas occasionally, or you've got to take those ideas. And how does that happen?
Absolutely. Well, I come from a broadcast news background, and I was taught that in all news platforms you have what are called buckets, essentially topics that you want to kind of prioritize over others. Essentially, what topics are topical, for a lack of better words. I don't necessarily know, compared to you and our technical director, Jared Moore. I mean, you guys have been here for decades. I've only been here for, going on 2 years, but, I'm still learning in terms of what are our buckets, what are the important things that our people need to know. But I think I'm getting I'm learning more and more, and still every day, just keeping an ear out and keeping an open mind in terms of, still seeking what's important and what's, I don't want to say less important, but ultimately what constitutes a well-rounded news cycle. Like you said, political coverage is very important. Crime, but also certainly not forgetting, the local things like sports signings. I know here within the next couple months we'll have a lot of Mvskoke high school students signing on to play either in college or professionally, and that's always something I look forward to, because we usually get news tips, and we get invited out to these signings and take pictures of the families, and it's just, these are moments like those are definitely special, and they're always a pleasure to document and then print within our paper, and then ultimately archive for the generations to come, to look back and see what our people were doing at that moment in time through the newspaper, a primary source.
That is a wonderful goal, and something that I've always looked to in my own career, and wanting to see these kinds of things happening. As far as like sports signing and things like that, some people might think, big deal, it doesn't mean too much, why are you doing that? But if you think about it, it's the progress that these kids are making, not only academically. I mean, you got to keep your grades up to stay on the team, but the progress they're making educationally too. I mean, they're staying in school, they're planning a career in the future, and in higher education, and of course, the families have to really enjoy that. Now, let's say, where would a story like this rank in what you think that we should be doing, like the ongoing and building feud between Governor Stitt and tribal governments in Oklahoma? Where would that rank?
That's a very good question, Gary. Certainly we always keep an eye out for coverage on the jurisdictional boundaries of Mvskoke Nation. Mm-hmm. And of course, that exists within the jurisdictional boundaries of the state of Oklahoma. And the political choices and legislation that's passed by the state obviously has effects on Indian country, specifically Mvskoke Nation. So those decisions are obviously very important, and I believe that astute coverage on on the relationship between our tribal leaders and our state leaders is very important. Obviously, if you've been following the news within the past, give or take 5 years, you'll understand that unfortunately relations between tribal leaders, not just with Mvskoke tribal leaders, but with the other civilized tribes and their leaders, is a little contentious, to say the least.
That's a kind way of putting it. There are, of course, a lot of our own citizens that would use a much harsher vocabulary there. But the thing that disturbs me is, of course, it flies in the face of proven federal law. I mean, this kind of thing has come up before, and the courts have always ruled in favor of the federal guidelines and like the treaty rights and things like that. One disturbing thing we've seen and lately is that when the governor will discuss this sort of thing, he keeps inserting the term race. And I find that particularly disturbing. And I'm sure that other Native people and other Oklahoma citizens should. But how do we do that? That's such a delicate subject. How would we handle something like that?
Certainly. I think it's fair to say that Governor Stitt has a very different view on the citizens within the state, and I think that there certainly could be improvements made to recognizing tribal sovereignty, as well as recognizing that the Mvskoke citizens, as well as other people that are citizens of other nations within the state, are essentially dual citizens. They're citizens of the sovereign nation of Mvskoke Nation, but they're also a United States citizen. And essentially, that's not, I think, properly recognized. And our job in terms of Indigenous and Mvskoke journalists is to assert that the Mvskoke Nation is a sovereign nation, and that our people are citizens of Mvskoke Nation. They are also citizens of the United States, and they are residents of the state of Oklahoma. And there are a lot of essentially complex political, I wouldn't say issues, but they can't, I don't think that, maybe the governor is necessarily has the same understanding as our leaders do and as you and I do as sovereign Mvskoke citizens. And it's essentially our job to hold him accountable through our coverage. Is he going to read it? Likely not. However, it's our job to provide that coverage for citizens and certainly assert that we are a sovereign nation and that we need to be treated as such.
Let's switch to looking at the government of the Mvskoke Nation now. In October of 2021, the Free Press mandate was passed and added to the Constitution. It freed our hands to cover the stories we felt were important, but also felt hindered in covering that. Now, as you look back in the past couple of years, how has that affected us as journalists? I mean, the job we do, and any feedback you might have heard from the citizenship.
Absolutely. Well, I must say that I do recognize my privilege of working in a department that has free press privileges. Obviously, that passed about 6 months before I started on the job. And it's just something that I've slowly come to recognize is something that is a unique privilege. As I've met journalists from other tribes, they can't do the same kind of reporting that we can do. I'll admit, so occasionally we will have to do a story about, a politician that has been involved in something involving corruption or perhaps, made a mistake. And sometimes those stories can be really tense in terms of, publishing, facing the backlash from, whomever might be upset by that. But at the same time, I do recognize that that's a privilege we shouldn't take lightly. It's something that, it's our responsibility to report
That
on
is
that.
a key word I was looking for. Some people don't understand that it is a huge responsibility and burden, if we will, in providing fair and accurate coverage. And sometimes it gets a little painful. And in a tribal situation, you're dealing sometimes with kinfolk. I'm sorry, that was my uncle there that did X, Y, Z, and now he has to but he's my uncle and he's a Mvskoke. He shouldn't have to deal with that. Do you hear that kind of pressure even now, 2 years after the law was passed here?
Oh, certainly. It's always interesting going home for Thanksgiving and talking with all the folks that read all my family on the Mvskoke side that read the newspaper, and we always talk about recent topics and such. But yeah, sometimes it can be a little tense in terms of there might be a story that we wrote that didn't paint someone in the most flattering way. But at the same time, as long as it's truth, as long as we told the truth, and if it was accurate and fair in terms of how we covered that story, that's our job. Essentially, this well. It's not always the most fun to pursue a story like that, but like I said, it's essentially our responsibility, because if we don't report on it, who is?
Right. And I think in doing that, I'm proud to say I think we're one of the standard bearers in Native journalism, and being able to do that and covering these kinds of stories. Now, I'm not a continuous reader of something like the Osage News or the Navajo Time. They are two other tribes that have this similar freedom of the press laws. But the rest of the coverage providing to Native America is, and I don't want people to take me wrong, but it's more like a community bulletin board. The graduations and things are fine, or somebody, getting on a baseball team, that's okay, or receiving a civic award from someone, that's fine. But for me, it's always had to be a much deeper delve into the professionalism, into this career as a journalist. Sometimes, as you say, we have to look at those stories that are kind of bad. Now, let's take a second here, and as we look back over this past year, what would you think were like the top stories here? I mean, the ones that were most important that we covered.
Absolutely. That's definitely a hard question to answer.
That's what I get paid for.
So much happens within the span of a year. I think some of the most important stories we've covered, I'll just give you three off the top of my head, but easily Baycone, doing coverage on it going up on the auction block for sale in Mvskoke. Baycone College is historically a university that has served Native American students, and it's a school that a lot of our readers and a lot of Mvskoke citizens have attended or know someone that attended. It's an institution that has been around for a very long time, and for a lot of folks, it's just devastating to see that this school is experiencing all these financial hardships, and that its future in terms of serving students is uncertain at the moment. Unfortunately, it just got pulled from another sheriff's auction days
ago.
Yeah, just at the time of this recording, just a few days ago. But yeah, I think that's something that I was very proud of that we broke back in April, and we just had really great coverage of that. I think probably the second biggest story we broke this year was the tribe's audits. We got a copy of the audits, and we found that there were inconsistencies, and we found that unfortunately they were not completed on time, and unfortunately, that had the tribe had some setbacks as a result of it, and a lot of citizens were concerned the way that our government was handling their finances. Something that I think something like audits are something that us as citizens just take for granted, that the people that are in charge of that know what they're doing, but unfortunately that's not always the case. And then lastly, I think again another recent story would be the Travis Scott trial. Our technical director and court reporter Jared Moore was in court both days, and spoke with Travis and his legal team, and they've been covering, kind of slowly following the breadcrumbs that have been leading up to this trial, and that has been ongoing for several years now, but concluded. And I think we did really great coverage on that as well. So those, I would have to say, are the three stories that are probably the most important that we covered this year.
What about the battle with the governor? Where would that rank?
Oh, that's a very good question. Well, Gary, as you know, I think you're the person that's been most... you've had your eyes set on that probably the most out of all of us. But no, that ranks, it's just kind of an ongoing thing, certainly. I can't really even think of one particular incident or one issue that that we covered, multiple certainly, but it's just it seems like it's something new every week or something new every month. Well, I guess maybe the thing that made the most waves in Indian country would certainly be the issue with the tribal license plates.
Mm-hmm.
There was that tribal citizen. Unfortunately, I forget which tribe they were from, but they lived outside of the jurisdictional boundaries of their tribe that they are a citizen of, and because of that, they got pulled over and they got a ticket for not paying state taxes, and that's something that's currently being reviewed right now. And that had a lot of concern, not just for the citizens of that particular tribe, but for citizens of all 39 tribes that exist in the state. So that's something that certainly, I agree, is very important, and I think something that we'll be looking at very closely here in 2024.
Well, I think it's probably going to intensify too, as there are elections still coming up. The nation is divided and this sort of thing. But traffic tickets in Tulsa are now the next big item there, and you better be careful, folks. Don't break the law. Don't end up in this huge court battle. Okay, now let's look at our own tribe. The biggest story as far as our own government. What kind of job have they been doing as you've been able to chronicle their activity?
Absolutely. I think in any given year there's always going to be triumphs, and there's certainly going to be lower points when it comes to how our government's doing. I'll just give you, a couple examples here for 2023. I think certainly a high point would be breaking ground on the new Citizen Services building that just happened recently. This is part of a new tribal master plan that's going to be an ongoing construction project here and within the next couple years. Based on the renderings from that project, I think that it looks fantastic, and I think that it's going to be a wonderful new facility that's going to serve our citizens and hopefully offer things that our citizens need and have been asking for a long time. Likewise, a low point of this year, might have to going back to the audits, and also for us doing coverage on that, even though we are funded by the tribe, we still had to work to get those copy of the audits and to read through them and look at the inconsistencies and interview people that worked closely with and the office that handled that. So I always recall I believe it was the filmmaker Spike Lee, talking about, he's a black filmmaker, and he talks about, the thing with whenever you're representing your people, you want to show the good sides and the bad sides, warts and all. And I definitely take that approach to covering Mvskoke Nation. Not that we want to only focus on the warts, but certainly we want to show all sides of it. We don't want to hide anything.
Right. Well, those warts, I think, had not been covered very well in past administrations. Now, we've got a team here that I would call a bunch of youngsters still, so to speak, and That's just because I'm the old guy here. But what's the job they're doing? We've had to convert many of our people from their primary tasks into picking up extra assignments or something that may not have been exactly in the field where they were hired. So how would you judge the performance of the Mvskoke media crew here?
How would I judge the performance? That's a very good question, Gary. Just obviously taking the opportunity to brag on our team a little bit. Our very own Shaylin Proctor joined us last May, and fresh out of school, and she has been learning so much in terms of news coverage and writing and photography, but she is a go-getter, and she is, anytime I ask her, I got this thing going on, can you run out and give me some pictures, and she's there. And I'm very thankful for her and her enthusiasm. We also just hired Meredith Johnson here in, I believe it was August. She comes from a more of a academic background, certainly, and had previously worked in the Chickasaw Nation. And she is just so thorough in how she approaches a story. She wants to make sure that all the details are there, and sometimes it can be a little daunting editing her work because she is just so intelligent and wants to make sure that every story has as much detail packed into it as possible. And sometimes I have to make hard decisions in terms of cutting down certain things that our people need the most, but she is so sharp and so just eager to pursue any story, no matter how maybe mundane it may be, or she gets into the weeds of political coverage or legislative coverage, and I'm just so thankful for her. Our very own Jared Moore has been taking the reins in terms of platform changes this year. As you can see right now, we have a new audio format, moving from the KOKL radio station to moving the Emvpanayv show here in our very own department. That took some time to maneuver and figure out how we were going to do this. And Gary, yourself, you've kept the Emvpanayv column going. It's always ready and available on the first of the month, and I know a lot of people always enjoy reading your column. I certainly enjoy reading your column and the wit and humor that you bring with that. But yeah, I just think that everyone here on staff is doing a wonderful job, and I couldn't be more proud as an editor.
Let's not forget another important member there. She's currently doing one of the things that she apparently does quite well, and she's out on maternity leave, and that's Morgan Taylor. She's been with us now, and I've watched her. She worked with me on the radio program, and I've watched her writing, and she's quite a skilled reporter, and thinks outside the box. That's what impresses me, and is not afraid of challenges or how to respond to something. So how would you judge her as being part of this team?
Absolutely. Morgan is truly an invaluable member. Mm-hmm. She is someone that is has a large presence in the community. She has a lot of family that grew up traditionally. Mm-hmm. She's someone that also grew up in the area, and she knows everyone. If I have a question about who to contact for a story, I always go to Morgan. And I agree, she does think outside the box. She's someone that I think always has a unique approach to stories, and she always has. I'm just amazed at the diversity of stories she does as well, like the Samson Tabitite that came in here not too long ago. She's been following him and his journey as a professional fighter. And honestly, I didn't even know we had citizens that were, professional fighters or even singers, or she finds the most incredible people with the most incredible stories, and we are very thankful for her as well.
In the last few minutes here, what's the future look like? We've got, I think, a good solid team that have look to settle down and stay with us and be a part of our establishment. We've still got, huge challenges for our tribe and things like that. And then in the mix of all of that, we have to remain cognizant of the human element. The book signings or somebody graduating from an academy, a military academy or something. So what does that future look like? I mean, we've got all these challenges ahead of us, but how do we tackle those and not lose sight of who we are?
Absolutely. I think essentially, the most important thing I always think and pray about is who am I serving and how can I serve their needs best today? Whether that be the news team or our readers, it's always going to come down to why are we here? Are we doing the best job that we can do? And if not, how can we readjust ourselves to, staying true to the mission of providing robust, diverse coverage, like we've talked about, coverage that's not always pretty, but coverage and coverage that may not always be the most interesting, but at the same time, coverage that our people need. I also likewise like to think that not only are we serving, obviously primarily Mvskoke people, but also Native Americans in general in the state and indigenous people in this continent and around the world. But essentially challenges that, we face, there's always, I think, going to be challenges to free press. While it is, certainly constitutionally protected now, that's something we can't take for granted. It's not, we could easily delve into just being a paper that produces fluff pieces, but I think it's important to remember that it's our responsibility to continue to pursue the stories that are not always easy, but at the same time important.
Let me add one little thing to all of that, and I agree with everything you've just said, but we also have an obligation, I think, to educate our community, our neighbors, our non-native folks here in this area, and whoever else picks up on it. So that's a job that's still important to us. Braden Harper, Managing Editor, Mvskoke Media, thank you so much for letting me get away with a few of those questions. And we'll see what the new year and the new administration has in store.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you for watching and listening to Emvpanayv. I'm Gary Fife. Hadam G. Justice.